breaking news all morning long, the fallout over a second fatal shooting in Minneapolis, to the intensifying weather, as foreign forces are also trying to undermine the U.S. Streaming now with more is the president of the Government Accountability Institute, Peter Schweitzer, the author of the new book, The Invisible Coup, How American Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon. It is available right now. Peter, thanks very much for being here. Congratulations on the book. Before we get into what you've learned about Mexico and what you've reported in the book, do you believe there are any outside agitators on the ground right now in Minneapolis? And what is your reaction to a second fatal shooting at the hands of Border Patrol?
Yeah, no, I think the chaos in Minneapolis is absolutely horrifying, and I think that foreign actors benefit from that. Here's what we know. We know that foreign powers like Mexico are actively involved in organizing what they call the resistance to Donald Trump. That's not my words. That's what Mexican officials who live inside the United States say. A gentleman named Mr. Robles, who lives in Ontario, California, who serves in the Mexican parliament. He's a high-ranking Morena Party official in Mexico, went around the country in 2025 saying that he was organizing the militancy, his words, inside the United States, working with activist groups. And there are other officials, Mexican officials living in the United States saying the same thing. If you look on the ground in Minneapolis, there are a couple of groups that are very actively involved in the anti-ICE protests. One of them is in the same building as the Mexican consulate and has worked aggressively with them. It's called Clues. There's another organization called MIRAC that has also worked very closely with the Mexican consulate. So I think we need to look at the political activities and agitation that Mexico is engaged in the United States. Again, these are not my words, Maria. This is what Mexican officials I quote in the book are saying they are doing in the United States.
All right, I want to talk more about what you've learned and what you've reported in the book, particularly as it relates to Mexico, but also Communist China. We'll take a break and come right back with that. I'm talking with Peter Schweitzer here on Sunday Morning Future. Stay with us. And I'm back with Peter Schweitzer, author of the new book, The Invisible Coup. Peter, what else did you learn and report? What were your big takeaways out of this book?
Well, we have been looking at immigration the wrong way. We viewed it primarily in terms of the economy and violent crime, which is very important. But the motivation of foreign actors is to weaponize immigration. So what do I mean? China has a very sophisticated program of exploiting birthright citizenship, and the Supreme Court's going to be hearing this case. That's the notion that if you happen to give birth to a child in the United States, that child will be an American citizen. Our federal government has no idea how many children are being minted as U.S. citizens using this technique, but China has looked into it. China has encouraged this. They've pushed it. The Chinese government believes that every year for the past 13 years, Maria, roughly 100,000 Chinese babies have been born in the United States that are then taken back to China, raised in China. When they turn 18, they're going to be U.S. citizens. They can vote in elections, donate to political campaigns, get government jobs. That's more than 1 million voters. Remember that 2016 election was settled by 80,000 votes. So it's a massive exploitation of our immigration laws. Other entities like the Muslim Brotherhood and the Mexican government are doing the same sort of thing.
Now, these are such important points, Peter. Thanks very much for pointing it out in this new book.
Absolutely.
Please come back soon, Peter. Peter Schweitzer is the president of the Government Accountability Institute. Thank you. That'll do it for us on Sunday Morning Future. Stay safe, everybody. I'm Maria Bartiromo. I'll be with you tomorrow on Mornings with Maria. And don't miss my special interview with the First Lady on Thursday on Fox Business's Mornings with Maria. Have a good Sunday. Evidence that he was waving a gun, doing anything to threaten Border Patrol. He had his phone, and he was shooting, he was viewing and recording the incident. That's what he was doing, recording the incident. What is your reaction? And you are an elected official. What can you do about it?
Well, look, I don't think there's any question the majority of Americans want President Trump and ICE to go in and apprehend the criminal illegals. And that's what President Trump campaigned on, and he's doing exactly what he said. I'll look at what happened in Minneapolis versus what happened in Washington, D.C. When President Trump sent the National Guard into Washington, D.C., the Mayor Muriel Bowser, supported that. She worked, her local law enforcement worked with the president.
Absolutely.
And in a short period of time, they have really been successful in Washington,
Absolutely.
D.C. That was a big success. Fast forward to where we are in Minneapolis. We have a governor, an attorney general, and a mayor of Minneapolis who are getting people jacked up, trying to get them, convinced that this is, some type of illegal raid, that all their lives are threatened. They've got all these white liberals coming in, trying to run over ICE, trying to, spray them and do everything to disrupt. And if I were President Trump, I would almost think about, okay, if the mayor and the governor are going to put our ICE officials in harm's way, and there's a chance of losing more, innocent lives or whatever, then maybe go to another city and let the people of Minneapolis decide, do we want to continue to have all of these illegals? Are we going to allow our governor, attorney general, and mayor to get away with this? And I think the people of Minnesota would rebel against their leadership, because it's very clear that a majority of Americans want the criminal illegals apprehended, and that's what ICE is trying to do.
Do we know that ICE saw the gun? Do we know that it was visible?
Of course we don't know that. You don't know that until all the evidence is gathered.
The incident, and knowing that he was armed, they learned that later.
They don't have to show the gun.
No, I'm like you and every other American. I've watched that video dozens of times in slow motion. I've tried to determine whether he actually pulled a gun out or not. I don't know. I just know that the situation's bad there. On one hand, there are thousands of criminal illegals in Minnesota, because that was a sanctuary city and a sanctuary state. The majority of Minnesotans, in my opinion, want them apprehended and sent back to where they came from. But on the other hand, I think this situation is only.
He came armed.
That there are so many cities
and with an attitude
that have issues with criminal illegals that I
to where he had no business and no right to be.
I hope that's something they're talking about doing right now, because Minneapolis isn't the only city, and if the local officials and the governor and attorney general are going to put federal agents' lives in danger with all the protesters and getting everybody fired up, trying to go there and disrupt ICE, then I think that's a decision they're going to have to make.
Well, we played a soundbite earlier from Governor Tim Walz, who told residents to make sure to film ICE agents. And I imagine that this individual had taken that directive and was filming ICE agents. But, Congressman, I want to move on, because last week we saw Jack Smith testify publicly, and he said that President Trump, quote, willfully broke the law. He blasted the DOJ's retribution in the second term. Your reaction to what you heard from Jack Smith, and where does your investigation stand in terms of his Arctic Frost investigation into Trump and his supporters?
Well, look, Jack Smith can say whatever he wants, but he failed to prove that there were any crimes committed, and the tactics that we saw he did. He didn't have the authority to subpoena the phones of members of Congress. He violated and abused his power as a special counsel. So, look, I think it's very clear that Jack Smith failed. That Jack Smith was doing this for one reason, that was political purposes. He was put in there by a corrupt Biden administration, by a corrupt Attorney General Merrick Garland, for one purpose, and that's to try to harm Donald Trump, to prevent Donald Trump from being elected.
Absolutely.
This
That was the
all
only
political,
reason.
and I think the American people have seen it. And look, I think that Jack Smith showed the world that he never had the evidence, and he abused his power. Anybody that watched that hearing could see that. So, I know that President Trump's tweeted out that Jack Smith should be convicted. Well, that's going to be his Department of Justice that's going to have to do that. I think the House Judiciary Committee did all they could do and got him to come forward and not only did a deposition, but also came back and did a public hearing. So if that's the direction that the Department of Justice wants to go, then I would fully support that, because I believe he abused his power, and I believe he was there for one reason, that's political purposes.
Right.
You also in the House have taken a step closer to referring the Clintons, Bill and Hillary, for criminal charges. Why?
Well, they failed to comply with a lawful subpoena, and a majority of Democrats on the House Oversight Committee agreed with all the Republicans that they are not above the law and they should be held in contempt of Congress. We'll be voting on that for the full House next week, and I expect every Republican and a bunch of Democrats to vote for that.
All right, we'll be watching that next week. Congressman, thanks very much for being here. Chairman James Comer. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Amen.